So President Trump issuing a new warning this morning, telling Fox that Iran should wave the white flag.
The president's comments come as the U.S. 60-day ceasefire agreement with Iran is set to expire today.
Trey Yingst spoke with President Trump earlier and joins us now from Tel Aviv. Trey.
Yeah, hey guys, good morning. Today, the 60-day memorandum of understanding between the United States and Iran expires. And Fox News spoke with the president early this morning to get his thinking on what comes next. The president told Fox News that Iran should put up the white flag of surrender. And he went on to say, I have no time schedule. I'm not in a hurry. The president talking broadly about the back channel negotiations that are taking place and confirming to Fox that there is a back channel directly between Washington and top IRGC officials in Tehran, the first public confirmation of such a channel. And this is critical because it comes as these conversations go back and forth. The president says they're good poker players, but they're dying, and that the midterms have nothing to do with my thinking. This is all moving very quickly in the region because there is a U.S. military posture that remains, and there are a lot of different players involved, and talks that are taking place as we speak right now between Iran and Oman about control of the Strait of Hormuz. And the president says if Oman gets in the way, we'll bomb the S out of them. Because at the end of the day, the president wants two clear things here. He wants control of the Strait of Hormuz. There is an ongoing U.S. naval blockade that is costing the Iranian regime hundreds of millions of dollars each day. And if ultimately this leads to future negotiations, that is when Iran's nuclear program is expected to be discussed. Guys?
Well, first off, Trey, there's some really intriguing things going on with Jared Kushner in the region. He's actually meeting with Hamas leaders, which is relatively unprecedented, about disarming. And he's meeting with them outside Gaza, but about disarming in Gaza. And there's an international force poised to come in that includes, we know, at least 8,000 Indonesians. But at the same time, Prime Minister Netanyahu is not committed to pulling out, understandably, until he's convinced that Hamas is disarmed. So what do you think could move this process forward, being that it seems so close?
Absolutely. There is a parallel diplomatic track that is taking place right now, and that's the Trump administration trying to move forward the Gaza ceasefire that is supposed to see Hamas lay down their arms. But it's a very complicated process because it comes after years of war between Israel and Hamas, after Hamas launched a terrorist attack into southern Israel on October 7th of 2023. Now, President Trump spoke about this, saying the Israelis should not be striking Gaza right now, and that the United States has their own relationship with Hamas. He adds they are giving up their guns. And so if this takes place, it will be a major step in these negotiations to disarm Hamas and usher in this new technocratic government. Now, as we speak, one of the top negotiators for the United States, Jared Kushner, is meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And I asked the president about the upcoming Israeli elections in October. He told Fox News, I think it's most appropriate for me to stay out of Israeli elections, but I may endorse somebody. Guys?
So, Trey, there's been a lot of conversation, and I got to be honest, conversation that I'm not even comfortable having on the stockpiles as it relates to this war and the larger impact of our other enemies. What did the president say about that? Is there concern right now?
So I asked the president about these stockpiles, and President Trump told Fox News what we've used is peanuts. He says the United States has a lot of mid-level weapons. He blamed former President Biden for shipping air defense systems to Ukraine at the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine war in 2022. But broadly speaking, the president did not express concern about the current munition stockpile across the region. And remember, the backdrop here is quite important. There are around 50,000 U.S. forces stationed in the Middle East right now, and it gives the president a variety of military options if he chooses to use them in the future. He noted that the Iranians are still continuing attacks in the Strait of Hormuz, but pointed out that the U.S. naval blockade remains in effect. He called it a wall of steel, and also noted that as this wall of steel is in place, the United States is helping to escort oil out of the Persian Gulf. And so there is still this export of oil taking place, not from Iran, but from regional Gulf allies that are working behind the scenes with the United States, not just on that defensive posture, but also ensuring that the global energy market remains stable.
So, Trey, the president has said the soldiers and the police are not getting paid in Iran. The current sanctions are costing Iran $435 million a day, it's being estimated. Explain what's happening to the people in Iran, and are they able to fight back against this? Because it reminds me of what happened. If they did fight back, it reminds me of what happened in January when people were getting killed for protesting. So how are the people surviving? And are they speaking out and saying that this is not fair, we need to get paid?
It's a great question, and I've been talking with regional intelligence sources to get a better understanding of what these economic sanctions and the U.S. naval blockade are actually doing to Iran. We know that the blockade is costing the regime hundreds of millions of dollars each day because the Iranians are not able to export crude oil from these critical ports along the Persian Gulf and into the Strait of Hormuz. But it's the economic sanctions that are expected to increase, according to U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. And when you have to think about sanctions, you look at this like an onion. And at the center of the onion, you have the U.S. naval blockade. And this is targeting Iran's main moneymaker, and that is their oil export apparatus. But then you have these secondary sanctions, and reports indicate they're going to start targeting even some of these Chinese companies that are buying Iranian oil. And so this is focusing mainly on the Iranian regime and officials in Tehran that use this money not only to produce missiles and drones, but also to pay top IRGC officials and even the field commanders that are ordering the missile strikes when they do take place against U.S. forces or allies across the region. And so this is a game of cat and mouse. But it's also a game of patience. And the president indicated to Fox News earlier today that he has no timetable. And this really flips the Iranian equation on its head because the Iranians thought they could wait this out. They thought that the midterms would pressure President Trump to make a decision and pull U.S. forces out of the region. But the president has indicated to Fox News he plans to keep the U.S. naval blockade in place. And this is increasing the economic pressure on the Iranian regime. Inflation is rising. The process of goods and actually exporting goods is decreasing. And the focus now is on the regime officials in Tehran and ensuring that they have fewer dollars to put toward their military and these efforts to try to threaten U.S. forces across the region.
Right. Thanks so much, Trey. Appreciate it. Great breakdown. What I think is going to happen is if we do not go back to military strikes, and who knows, we might, around October, they're very familiar with our November elections, they'll start doing something more aggressive, more aggressive, more aggressive. Then when we answer, price of oil and gas go up, and it's going to hurt Republicans come the primaries. Because what he wants to do is diminish what they want to do is diminish President Trump's power, because he's the only one to ever confront them militarily. There's been sanctions, and there's been agreements, and there's been harsh words, but he's the only one to take them on directly after 47 years. And they want to do anything they can to make sure he's not president, or if he is president, make sure he does not have as much power. So that's what I worry about. They'll be able to dictate our elections unless we take them down before they can.
That's why we have to make it a national security issue. We cannot. It's not being elitist. It's not saying that it doesn't matter. Of course, gas prices matter. It impacts not just people on the day-to-day basis, but everything is controlled by oil and gas. But when you tell the American people this is a national security, what could happen if we don't get involved? No one would have ever suggested when they attacked 9/11, our Twin Towers, and the gas prices went up when we were in combat operations, that should impact our response to that.
Well, don't forget, these are people that want to wipe America off the face of the map. They want to wipe Israel off the face of the map. They say death to America. So if they got a nuclear weapon, we won't even have cars to put gas in, right? I mean, it's more important for them not to have a nuclear weapon because they do want to kill us. They hate us. And don't forget that.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.